All right, hello. My name is Ryan. I'm a VR developer. I have a VR company here in Seattle called InVRse. We've made a number of games and solutions. One of the ones that one of the most applicable solutions we've made is a method for using mobile phones and tablets inside of VR and AR headsets. So you can actually use the touchscreen device even if your vision is completely occluded. Instead of doing any of the VR and AR stuff that I usually do, I kind of came here to learn. I'm way out of my depth with AEC. This is not even close to a specialty of mine. And so one of the ways that I occasionally learn about new topics is by designing around it, learning, asking questions, and then trying to abstract it into ways that I understand. And a lot of that sometimes comes through board games. I think the average board game enthusiast around here maybe has played Monopoly or Risk. There's thousands upon thousands of newer games. They teach you things, well, I'm not going to say that you learn about property ownership through Monopoly or world domination through Risk, but there are newer games that can teach you some actual life skills, especially if you're younger. Things like, there's a game called Acquire, which teaches a little bit about the stock market. There's a really cool technical game called Terraforming Mars, where you learn about the scientific requirements that it would take to go and terraform a new planet by raising temperatures and adding water and oxygen to the atmosphere. And there's a new game called Wingspan that was in New York Times, and that one actually teaches ornithology and methods for learning about birds and things like that. So I decided to take a little bit of what I've been parsing from some of these conversations and a little bit of past knowledge from a friend who is a commercial real estate broker. And I tried to make a game that represents being a broker of properties, kind of indistinct whether you're leasing or buying, but we'll mostly think of it as leasing. Next slide. So I overlaid some locations on a map of Seattle. It was the quickest way to do it. I divided into 3 different colors. Red is residential, yellow is commercial, and black is industrial. There's many other subdivisions that we could do. Those are the ones that kind of decided on. And the properties, I didn't really find a good way to put it here, but each of the available properties at the beginning of the game is marked with a green triangle. Those will have a number of cubes on them between 1 and 5. Those are their current market value. And those values will fluctuate up and down, which is why you use cubes. You can just add a cube really quickly to make its price go up. You can take a cube away to make its price go down. Next. So here's a little bit of zoom in. So the game is a dice drafting game, which is sort of a new mechanic that's crept up recently. There's a pool of dice in a bag. There's something like 36 dice of the 3 different colors and different ratios. You take, at the beginning of every round of play, you take a big scoop of dice, you roll all of them, and then players will collectively choose a die on their turn and then assign it to the board. What they're doing in that situation is they're finding a buyer, which is what the die represents, and they're trying to match that to an appropriate property of the property type that they're looking for. So in this case, you can see that there's the red dice are really high, there's the gray-black dice on the left, and the yellow dice are on the right. So when it's your turn, you would get to choose one of the dice and choose a property. Now, because I don't have the cubes marked on the map, it's not really, the symbology is a little missing, but imagine that there's a red location up there that had value of 5. So next slide. You could then take one of those dice on your turn and you could assign it to that property. And when you do, you take the budget that was the die number and then subtract the value of the property, and then you keep what's left over as a commission. So the game is based on trying to take the right dice of the right color, finding a location that has a very similar value, and then assigning your dice so that you can get a commission on it. And let's see what else. Compared. You actually, throughout the game, you will specialize. So at the beginning, everyone is pretty much the same at residential, commercial, and industrial. But every time you successfully place a tenant into a location, you will have your reputation in that will go up. which will over time unlock certain perks. So if you continue placing residential properties, as your reputation goes up there, you'll be able to maybe take a second turn on your turn. You might get larger commissions. You might be able to place additional tenants in places where there's already dice, and a bunch of different game variations. And let's see. You play until the dice in the bag run out. Each round of the game sort of represents a vague, maybe a quarter, maybe a year, something like that. And so after all of the tenants are placed, the game ends. Next one. So we actually will fluctuate the prices of the locations in a method that maybe abstracts out how markets work, or maybe not. So in this case, any place that does not have any tenants on it, if it's still vacant by the end of the round, then the price of that location will go down. So you'll remove a cube from its value. But any place that is occupied will go up. And so you can see we've got +1s on the places that are occupied. There would obviously be way more dice on the board by this point. The board will fill up, but the method that I have for expansion is that anytime a 6 is rolled, that 6 is a tenant who has so much money that they're actually just going to develop a new property. So if there was, let's say, a 6 that was red, then we would add a new location into the red, similar like one of those little green triangles. So the board would actually expand. If there's a lot of expansion over time, the prices overall will probably descend because there's more supply than there is demand. When the board kind of crowds out, if there's not a lot of 6s rolled, then the prices are actually going to go up in the occupied locations. And so I'm trying to kind of represent some market forces. And I think in my couple play tests that I did, only a couple, the game balanced out really nicely. So that is literally it.
Is this a single-player game, or is there like who are you competing against?
4 players. So this is a literal tabletop game with components. It's 2 to 4 players right now.
Did you have, obviously there's some recreational value for sure. I was trying to draw the bridge to what you might have seen is that how is this going to help change or impact something, in the simulation of what you're in the game.
It would have negligible impact for the 10-ish years that it would take for someone, let's say a 15 or 18-year-old who would play this game to potentially grow up and maybe realize that this is something that they wanted to pursue. So, when I cannot over or understate, the importance of games and kind of education. Some people think that it is a huge impact. Some people don't think so. But, there are definite things where if you're exposed to something early, you get an understanding of maybe market forces, you get an understanding of commerce. This was my abstraction of the very small sliver that I know from a friend who repeatedly tells me about being a commercial real estate broker. I ask him questions and he gives me more information than I can handle. And so even, I don't think I've nailed everything because they're very much not a subject matter expert. But trying to gamify things is one of the ways that I solve problems.
So, do you think this would be a good tool outside of playing a game and having it being a learning experience? Scenario planning?
I wouldn't have thought so until I saw City Builder a couple hours ago. Yeah. And all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, these are kind of the same maps with potentially the same zoning or, more refined zoning. The market price is going up and down based on different factors.
So you made Seattle City Council or some other agency like that sit down and play this game. I'm just wondering the concept.
Man, this process is stupid.
It's a different scenario.
I would recommend they do the City Builder presentation that we all saw because that one's super data driven. But there's having this kind of influence over the board might help people kind of open their minds to what their decisions have on impacts.
Good.
Awesome.
Glad you came.
Thank you.